When I was 17, my family moved 2 states away without telling me. They left a note on the kitchen counter that said, "You'll figure it out." 12 years later, after I had finally built a life without them, they reached out to reconnect. At 17, I came home to a completely empty house and that note. It was one of the cruelest things I had ever read. Just 4 words, "You'll figure it out." I had no idea what I had done wrong. For a long time, I assumed they were simply tired of pretending to care. Eventually, I understood that they had never really tried. When I was 13, I baked a birthday cake for my mom on my own. She called it clumpy. At 15, I helped my brother prepare for his finals. He responded by calling me a know-it-all and slamming his door in my face. At 16, I gave my entire paycheck to my dad so he could pay bills. Later, when he called me useless and I reminded him of the money, he yelled at me. I was consistently useful, but never valued. My parents and my brother, my only immediate family, packed up and left without a word. A week later, the landlord informed me they had canceled the lease early. I had 7 days to leave. I stayed with a friend for 3 nights until I ran out of options. After that, I slept in the back of a storage unit I rented with the last of my savings. I showered quietly at the YMCA, ate peanut butter straight from the jar for most meals, applied for jobs on library computers, and acted as if everything was under control. Eventually, I was hired at a diner for the night shift. The manager was strict but fair. She paid me in cash until I could get proper identification. Once, when I nearly collapsed from exhaustion, she let me rest in the break room. I worked constantly. I bought a prepaid phone, kept every receipt, and watched free YouTube videos about budgeting and goal setting. The first year was about survival, but I survived. The turning point came when a regular customer offered me temporary work organizing office files. It paid 3 times more than the diner. I accepted. That assignment led to another and then another. I learned quickly, arrived early, and asked direct questions. By 22, I was freelancing full-time. By 25, I started a consulting business with a folding table and a borrowed laptop. By 27, I had 5 contractors, my own office, and clients I once thought were out of reach. At 29, I became a millionaire. Not online fame or image-based wealth, but real savings, a retirement account, no debt, a paid-off apartment, and reliable health insurance. The first time my banking app showed 7 figures, I cried. During those difficult years, my family never contacted me, not once. I once saw my brother appear in a suggested friends list online. He was married and still living in the state they had moved to. I wondered if he ever mentioned me to his wife, whether he said I ran away or avoided the topic entirely. I sometimes thought it might have been easier to feel anger, but it wasn't anger, it was grief. I now attend therapy because I want to remain whole. I keep a list of people who supported me when they had no obligation to, co-workers, classmates, and strangers who showed genuine kindness. Recently, I gave a podcast interview about surviving family abandonment. It reached 1 million views in 4 days. My inbox filled with messages from people who felt understood. Then one email stood out. The subject line read, "You're still our daughter." It was from my mom. There was no apology, just a brief message suggesting we talk. Soon after, my brother emailed, "We miss you. Can we fix this?" I closed my laptop and sat with it. I needed time. My therapist, Melissa, advised me to wait at least a week before responding. She said, "Give yourself space. There's no urgency." I followed her advice. I worked, exercised, met friends, but the email stayed in my mind. My mom's message felt distant and formal. My brother's felt shorter but more personal. After 10 days, I replied to my brother, "It's been 12 years. What changed?" He answered within an hour. He said the podcast made him realize what had happened. He reminded me he was only 15 at the time. He said he had been afraid to challenge our parents and had looked me up online over the years but never reached out. He said he was proud of my success. I asked him directly why he waited until I was publicly successful. His next message was lengthy. He admitted my parents' business had failed, money was tight, his wife was pregnant with their 2nd child, and medical bills were increasing. The reason became clear. A week later, my mom sent family photos, pictures of me as a baby at the beach, building a snowman with my brother. At the bottom, she wrote, "We made mistakes. We want to make amends." In therapy, Melissa reminded me that I controlled the situation. I owed them nothing. Closure could mean reconciliation or a final goodbye. I felt conflicted. Part of me wanted to reject them completely. Another part wanted answers. A small part still wanted their love. I agreed to meet my brother alone in Chicago, halfway between us. I nearly canceled, but I showed up. He looked older but familiar. We spoke awkwardly at first. Then he apologized, saying he hadn't known until it was too late. I asked him the question that had stayed with me for years. Why me? He said our parents saw me as strong and independent. They believed I would manage on my own. I told him about the storage unit, the YMCA showers, the night shift at 17. He said our parents had told him I chose to stay behind and had a plan. That was not true. By the end, he seemed remorseful. He showed me pictures of his wife and daughter. He didn't ask for money. When we parted, he hugged me. I stood still. Melissa later pointed out that while he apologized, he framed himself mostly as powerless. At 15, he could have contacted me at some point in 12 years. That night, my mom called. She cried and said she was proud of me. When I asked why me, she said they were in debt and couldn't afford 3 children. She believed I would go to social services and be placed with another family. She called it a favor. I ended the call and blocked the number. The next morning, my dad emailed for the first time. He described financial hardship and mentioned eviction. At the end, he asked for help. He did not ask about my life. With Melissa, I discussed boundaries and the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. I decided I could have a relationship with my brother, but no financial support and no relationship with our parents unless they fully accepted responsibility. He replied that he was disappointed and said families should help each other. I did not respond. Instead, I scheduled therapy and booked a trip to Bali. I needed distance. While I was away, my dad sent increasingly urgent emails. I did not read them fully. Michael later apologized and said he had started therapy. He asked me if I would meet our parents briefly in a public place. I declined. I wasn't ready. Soon after, my parents showed up at my apartment building. I refused to see them. Security was notified. Melissa later described their behavior as harassment, not reconciliation. Then Michael sent an angry message saying I'd embarrassed them and they were desperate. I made no reply. I left town to visit my friend Rachel in Portland, the same friend who once let me sleep on a couch when I had nowhere to go. While I was there, I learned my mom had been hospitalized for a heart issue. Michael blamed me for the stress. Melissa firmly reminded me that I was not responsible for my mother's health. When I returned home, there were flowers outside my door and more messages urging contact. I blocked the numbers. Then my sister-in-law, Jenny, came to see me in person. She brought her young daughter. She told me she had only learned the truth 3 years earlier. She said my parents had told others that I ran away and stole from them. She showed me social media posts portraying themselves as victims. The timeline proved they were false. Jenny explained that she and Michael were not the ones in financial crisis. My parents were. She said I deserved to know the full story and that she wanted her children to know me if I chose that. Later that night, my dad sent a threatening email claiming defamation and demanding compensation. I forwarded it to my lawyer, Marcus. He assured me that truth is a complete defense against defamation and advised me not to respond. The following day, Michael left a voicemail saying our parents were angry with Jenny and acting unpredictably. He asked me to call him back using her phone. For the first time in this process, I felt clarity. Their outreach had never been about accountability. It had been about control, reputation, and money. I am no longer the 17-year-old who was told to figure it out. I did figure it out, and now I decide who has access to my life. I wasn't sure what to believe anymore. I called Marcus again. He recommended arranging a public meeting with Michael and Jenny, with him present as my attorney, so we could hear them out in a controlled setting. I agreed, though reluctantly. We scheduled the meeting at a restaurant near Marcus's office the next day. They arrived on time. Both looked worn down, stressed, and exhausted. Jenny had a bruise on her arm that she kept trying to cover. Michael avoided eye contact. Marcus introduced himself clearly as my lawyer, which made Michael visibly tense. We ordered coffee, sat down, and let them speak. What they shared was more serious than I had anticipated. For years, my parents had relied on Michael financially, moving in and out of his home, requesting money for emergencies, offering childcare while criticizing his parenting. When Jenny confronted them about the truth regarding me, my father grabbed her arm hard enough to leave marks. Michael then forced them to leave his house. Since then, they had been staying in a motel, calling repeatedly and showing up at his workplace. I listened carefully. Michael broke down as he described how our parents had controlled him throughout his life. He said they convinced me had abandoned the family. He admitted he had been too afraid to question their narrative and felt trapped in their manipulation for 12 years. He was now afraid they might harm Jenny or the children. Marcus asked detailed questions about financial ties, mortgage co-signers, shared bank accounts, house keys, passwords. Michael confirmed that our parents had co-signed his mortgage, that his father remained on his bank account from his college years, that they had spare keys, and that they knew his login information. Marcus took notes, occasionally glancing at me. By the end of the meeting, I felt emotionally drained, but clearer. The situation extended beyond my experience. Michael and Jenny were also affected, differently, but still under pressure. Marcus advised them to consult their own attorney, provided a colleague's contact, and instructed them to change locks, passwords, and banking arrangements immediately. They agreed. As we left, Michael hugged me. This time I returned it. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. We had both been impacted by the same people. That evening, I received a series of increasingly aggressive messages from my parent, accusations, threats, attempts at guilt. I blocked every number. I called Jenny to confirm they were safe. She said they had changed the locks and stayed with friends. They were exploring a restraining order. The next morning, Jenny called in a panic. Someone had broken into their house. Items were missing: Lily's baby photos, important documents, Michael's laptop. A note had been left behind. Family matters should stay in the family. I told her to contact the police immediately and said I would meet them there. I informed Marcus on my way. When I arrived, a patrol car was outside. An officer was taking statements. The house was in disarray, drawers pulled out, papers scattered. Michael sat with his head in his hands. Jenny pointed out missing items. I introduced myself as family there to assist. The responding officer appeared skeptical. He asked whether a key might have been used and suggested it could be a misunderstanding. Jenny showed him the bruise on her arm and described the escalation. He documented everything, but noted that without direct evidence, proving responsibility would be difficult. After the officer left, we cleaned up and identified more missing items, including financial records and a spare car key. Michael blamed himself for not protecting his family or challenging our parents sooner. I did not argue with him, but I also did not dwell on it. We needed solutions. Marcus arrived and assessed the situation. He stated that this significantly escalated matters. Breaking and entering is a serious offense. He advised documenting everything and recommended we all stay elsewhere temporarily. He said he would file emergency restraining orders the following morning. We changed locks again, secured windows, and discussed installing security cameras. Taking such precautions against our own parents felt surreal, but necessary. Shortly after, Michael received a message from our father: "We're watching you." I took a screenshot and sent it to Marcus. At that point, I decided they should stay with me. My building had security, cameras, and a doorman already aware not to admit my parents. They accepted. That night, we ate takeout in my living room. Lily played with toys Jenny had packed. We discussed practical next steps, legal filings, documentation, changing contact information, and long-term safety measures. It was not a typical family reunion, but it felt constructive.
We were addressing reality together. The next morning, Marcus confirmed he had filed emergency restraining orders for all of us. A hearing was scheduled for the following week. He believed our case was strong. That night, Jenny checked on me. She admitted Michael had been quietly overwhelmed as well. We discussed why she had initially chosen to believe me. She said she had long suspected something was wrong with my parents' version of events. The podcast confirmed her concerns. She did not want her daughters growing up thinking abandonment was acceptable. That conversation marked the beginning of mutual trust. The next few days followed a steady rhythm, working, coordinating with Marcus, staying alert. We were secure, but tense. On Friday, Marcus called with updates. Security footage from a gas station near Michael's house placed our parents' vehicle in the area during the break-in. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for Monday. He believed our case was strong. That night, a brick was thrown through Michael's car window in my building's parking garage. Security footage showed a man in a baseball cap, face turned away. We could not confirm identity, but the timing was notable. Another police report was filed. Sunday evening, we prepared for court, reviewing evidence, organizing documentation, discussing how to present events clearly and factually. We needed to demonstrate a pattern of escalation. That same night, I received an email from my mother with the subject line, "Last Chance." It read, "If you go to court tomorrow, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Marcus added it to our file and advised no response. We slept poorly. On Monday morning, we dressed professionally and met Marcus outside the courthouse. He reassured us that the evidence supported our position. Inside, I saw my parents. They looked older and smaller than I remembered. My mother moved towards me briefly, but my father stopped her. They did not speak. In court, Marcus presented our documentation, the break-in, threatening communications, the flower delivery, the damaged car vehicle, and the documented history of manipulation and abandonment. The judge listened carefully. When my parents spoke, they denied wrongdoing. They claimed they were attempting reconciliation and that events were being exaggerated. They denied involvement in the security footage and described their messages as misunderstood. They portrayed themselves as victims. The judge asked directly about my abandonment at 17. My father attempted to frame it as a difficult decision due to financial hardship. The judge interrupted and asked plainly whether they had left a minor child behind and moved out of state. My father hesitated and referenced financial strain. After reviewing both sides, the judge granted 3-year restraining orders for all of us. The orders prohibited contact, proximity to our homes or workplaces, and indirect communication through third parties. Any violation would result in immediate arrest.
My parents looked stunned, as if they couldn't believe consequences were finally catching up to them. As we exited the courtroom, my mom said my name softly once. I kept walking. I didn't turn around. With each step, I felt some of the weight lift. It wasn't full healing, but it was a beginning, the first firm boundary backed by real consequences. Outside, Marcus shook our hands. He said we handled ourselves well, that the restraining orders were strong, and that we should contact him immediately if there were any violations. He added that he was proud of us for standing up for ourselves. We thanked him, still processing everything, but relieved, like people who had made it through a disaster. Michael hugged me on the courthouse steps, this time fully. He apologized for everything, for not protecting me back then, for not searching harder, for believing lies, and for bringing this situation back into my life. I told him we would be okay. We had each other now. We could build something better. As we walked toward our cars, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I hesitated, then opened it. It was a photo of Lily playing in a backyard at a friend's house, unaware she was being watched. Beneath it were 4 words, "This isn't over yet." I showed Michael immediately. He turned pale and called Jenny, who was already on her way to pick Lily up. I told them to meet me at my apartment. Then I called Marcus from my car, forwarding him the message. He instructed us to go home directly and said this was a clear violation of the restraining order. He would contact the police and meet us there. The drive felt long. I kept checking my mirrors. When I reached my building, I paused briefly to steady myself before going upstairs. Michael and Jenny were already there. Jenny held Lily tightly. The child looked confused. Michael paced. I showed them the message. Jenny began crying, saying someone had been watching her daughter. Michael held them both, visibly shaken. Marcus arrived with 2 officers. They reviewed the message, took statements, and made calls. They said they would send patrols to the friend's house, attempt to trace the number, and increase security around my building. They followed procedure, but I sensed they did not fully understand how determined my parents could be. After the officers left, we discussed next steps. Jenny suggested checking into a hotel under different names. Michael proposed staying with relatives out of state. I sat there growing frustrated. We had followed every legal channel. We had restraining orders, yet the harassment continued. I stood up and said I was done running. They had already taken my childhood. I would not give them my adulthood as well. That night, we rotated shifts, staying awake. Around 2 a.m., I noticed a familiar car circling the block, my dad's old Buick. It passed 3 times before parking across the street. I took photos and woke Michael. We watched as our father sat in his car, technically outside the restraining order's limits, but clearly signaling his presence. In the morning, I sent the photos to Marcus. He acknowledged the concern, but explained that since our father remained off the property, it was not technically a violation. He advised continued documentation. I felt discouraged. Legal protection had limits. Michael and Jenny decided to take Lily to a secure hotel for a few days. I helped them pack and promised to stay in constant contact. After they left, I called Melissa and described everything. She asked a direct question. What do you actually want from your parents? That question stayed with me. I made a list: to live without fear, to maintain a relationship with my brother and his family, to stop feeling responsible for my parents' behavior, to move forward without the past controlling me. Reconciliation was not on that list. Forgiveness was not there either. I wanted freedom. That afternoon, I sent my parents a brief email. I acknowledged that I knew they were watching my building and proposed one final meeting the next day at noon in a public coffee shop. Just me, no lawyers. After that, they would leave all of us alone permanently. I sent it before I could reconsider. My dad replied quickly, "We'll be there." The next morning, I arrived early and chose a table with a clear view of the entrance. They arrived at noon, looking tired. They sat across from me without speaking. I told them the meeting was not for reconciliation or financial support. It was to make one point clear. It was over. They had lost not only the court case, but also their access to me, to Michael, and to their grandchildren. Continued harassment would have consequences. When my dad tried to interrupt, I stopped him. I showed them screenshots of their threats and the photo of Lily. I stated that if they violated the restraining order again, I would escalate the situation fully and publicly. I had documentation and resources. My mom said they wanted their family back and deserved another chance. I responded that abandonment, dishonesty, and harassment were not minor mistakes. My father accused me of ingratitude and claimed he owed me for raising me. I rejected that idea directly. Basic parental responsibility does not create lifelong entitlement. I stood and delivered a final warning. Any further violation would result in immediate legal action and broader exposure. I made it clear my priority is protecting the family I chose. As I left, my mom asked me if I hated them. I turned back briefly and said I felt nothing. They were strangers now. That was the result of their actions. I called Michael afterward and explained what happened. He was concerned I met them alone, but relieved someone had confronted them directly. I joined Michael and his family at their hotel for several days. Lily called me Auntie Emma for the first time. That moment mattered. We waited for retaliation, but nothing happened. Days passed, then weeks. Marcus confirmed my parents had returned to their home state. The restraining orders remained active. Gradually, we resumed normal life. Michael secured a job in my city. Jenny enrolled Lily in preschool.
They purchased a home nearby. We began having Sunday dinners together, creating traditions based on mutual respect. 6 months after the coffee shop meeting, Marcus forwarded me a letter from my mom so my address would remain private. It contained no excuses or demands. It acknowledged harm, admitted failure as parents, and stated they were seeking counseling. They said they would respect the restraining orders and understood if I never wanted contact again. Michael received a similar letter. We discussed it over dinner. We did not decide anything definitive. We agreed to continue prioritizing our healing and maintaining boundaries. I keep the letter in a drawer, not as a sign of forgiveness, but as recognition that I have the right to choose who remains in my life. Last week, Lily turned 4. We held her birthday party at my apartment. There were balloons, cake, gifts, laughter. My once quiet home was filled with conversation and warmth. At one point, I stepped into the kitchen and observed everything: the movement, the noise, the connection. I remembered the note left on my counter years ago. "You'll figure it out." I did. Not in the way they intended. I figured out what family should look like. I learned what love requires. I understood what I deserved. Life isn't perfect. I still attend therapy weekly. I still have moments of anxiety, but I am healing. We all are. We are building something intentional from what was broken. People sometimes ask me if I will reconcile with my parents. I don't have that answer. What I do know is this: I am no longer defined by what was done to me. I am defined by what I built afterward, by the choices I made, and by the family I created. And that is enough.